Hello and welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I am one of your hosts, Derek, and I've got my other co-host with me here, Ryan.
Hello.
Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Derek.
And we are your Nicolas Cage movie review podcast where we spin a wheel to find out which Nicolas Cage movie we're going to talk about next time on the show. In this episode, we are talking about the 2021 drama mystery Pig, which is said to possibly be Nicolas Cage's best performance.
It's his favorite performance, he said several times.
And that's very interesting because we've already seen Joe, which he claims to be his performance that is most like him in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting point of comparison that we have. The movie Pig, however, is about a truffle hunter who lives alone in the Oregon wilderness. And he must return to his past in Portland in search of his beloved foraging pig after she is kidnapped.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell, yeah.
It is. That's the movie. Now the way we do things here is Ryan takes diligent notes as he watches the movie. I just snack, and then we go through those notes and talk about the film more or less in the order of events as they are portrayed to us.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's important to say that this movie was pretty hyped. I mean, it wasn't when it came out. It didn't do well at the box office, and people weren't really sure. I remember when the first trailer came out, and it kind of made it look like John Wick, but with a pig. And people started seeing it when it released, and people were talking about how great it was, how he was going to win an Oscar, so many things. He did not win an Oscar, but he was nominated, and the movie was nominated for hundreds of awards. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure it's on IMDb somewhere, but yeah, I mean, between Nic Cage and the movie overall, it was well received among critics.
Yeah, it officially had 74 nominations and it won 37 times. This was a highly regarded movie, even if he didn't win, Best Actor necessarily, at the Oscars. So
right, and this was on a personal level. I had already seen this movie, so I knew what I was getting into. But Derek had not seen this movie and had been wanting to see this movie. So I did it meet your expectations, Derek?
Well, it did not meet my expectations because my expectations were off base, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Because I was under the impression that you mentioned. I thought this was John Wick, but with a pig.
Right.
And that is not the right way to approach this movie.
But that's what the trailers made it look like. It was very weird.
I'm both like glad and a little sad that it's not that though, because I think the movie in my head would have been really fun too. But this was so different than what I'm used to seeing in general, let alone from Nick, that I loved it. I was completely enthralled by this movie. It is beautifully shot. It is so just purposefully written and handled. And there are just some gorgeous, beautiful moments throughout this movie. And it's a somber movie. It's a sad movie. But it's so nice at the same time.
I thought what was interesting about it was that it's not an action movie or anything, right? But it manages to keep your attention the whole time. And it doesn't, some of these movies, it's a real stretch to get through, and we're both like yawning and ready to be done with it by the end, or maybe I am. I don't know about you, but
there's been some times.
Yeah. But this one was, I mean, by the time when the movie was over, I was like, okay, wow. I mean, that did not feel like an hour and a half or 2 hours or however long it is, because it does manage to hold your attention the whole time, which is rare for me for not being like an action movie. So
there's a tension that runs through the whole film where you feel like he could snap at any moment and this could take a sharp right turn. And so there's just this building tension that very rarely gets any type of break.
Right. It kind of just carries that tension through the whole movie.
There are a couple of scenes in this that are just some of my favorite Nic Cage scenes. for like not even for stereotypical reasons. They're just incredibly well orchestrated scenes, just like from top to bottom.
Yeah.
I have a lot of good things to say about this movie.
Well, we'll
And
get to those
yeah,
scenes as we go through, I imagine.
there are a couple of
they probably match mine. I feel like there's a couple
probably.
You and I have similar tastes on a lot of this stuff, so I think we'll share those sentiments.
There are a couple of little pieces of trivia though that I think are noteworthy. One, they had 20 days to make this movie. That's it. So they basically like had to get things right and then move on. There wasn't multiple opportunities to do retakes or reshoots or anything like that. So 20 days, 3 weeks to make this movie. The budget was so tight, they could not actually get a trained truffle pig. And so the pig bit him on multiple occasions. And he was actually quoted after getting what was a bad bite, quoted by saying, "I've been set on fire. I've been flipped in cars, but it'll be sepsis from a pig bite that kills me."
Luckily, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. But yeah, so just a couple little interesting notes because this is a really nice movie, and it shows you what you can do with a high quality team committed
and an
to the
idea.
same goal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. The movie opens with Nicolas Cage's character, who we know as Rob in this first part of the movie, washing his dishes in a river, kind of establishing that he's a man of the land. He's not interested in modern amenities. He just, does what he has to do with what he has, and he's happy in that life. Right after we get that scene, we get a message on the screen that says part 1. We have I think 3 parts in this movie, all named after food dishes, which is kind of unclear why at this point. But the first part was called rustic mushroom tart.
Which is that supposed to be the dish that he makes?
Yes, for him and his pig. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all these parts relate to the things that happen food wise in that part. So then we get a scene of him out in the land, in the woods, truffle hunting with his pig. And this pig's pretty cute. I like this pig.
I don't have strong feelings about
Okay, fair enough. Derek's not a pig fan.
I don't have a lot of experience with pigs. It seemed like a perfectly fine pig.
Yeah, but I mean, you didn't think it was cute. I'm not talking in terms of pigs. You've seen cute animals before.
I suppose.
Okay, there you go. That's all I wanted.
Okay.
So then we get a guy rolling up in a yellow Camaro. He's got this guy. It's established at this point that he has like a cabin in the woods. It has like no power, no nothing.
It's very small. It might even be just like a single room, from what I gather.
And yeah, this guy in a business suit rolls up in his yellow Camaro, brand new.
So when the car first pulled up, I really thought, I was like, oh man, they're getting started with this real fast, because I thought that was going to be
the pig murder.
Yeah, I thought that's when it was happening. I was wrong.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, the guy gets out of the car and walks up to him, and starts talking to him, and takes like a cooler and leaves him with like some bags. So you at this point in the cooler, he pulls out like some truffles and he's sniffing them, and they're pretty sizable truffles. I mean, clearly this man Rob has a good lay of the land as far as truffles go. I mean, he's got a good spot and knows what he's doing.
For people who may not know, by the way, truffles are like the most sought after mushroom, like truffle oil, for example, and things like that are very high end ingredients used in like elegant restaurants, for those who don't know.
Yeah. And so he's talking to Rob the whole time, and Rob does not respond in any way, doesn't even act like he notices him. And so he says like, see you next Thursday, and walks away, gets in his car. And then we see Rob taking some batteries out of one of the bags and putting them into like an old boombox, and putting a tape in that says "for Rob." I think it's what it said. I don't have a note for that, but
it says "for Robin."
Robin,
yeah. But
which at this point, yeah, we don't really know what's going on. you get the idea that his name is probably Robin, and Rob is short for that. But yeah, and so he plays the tape, and you hear like a woman's voice, and she gets like 2 sentences in, and he has to shut it off. He can't take it anymore. So you get the idea that maybe something bad happened. If you're thinking this is going to be the John Wick movie, then at this point you would be like, oh, that's the wife that died, and now he has to avenge her or something like that. So him and his pig go to bed,
as you do,
and we get the pig napping.
Yeah, man, that it happened so fast.
The
And
pig
again,
basically like gets up and is like making noise, and he's like, "It's just the coyotes. It's just the coyotes. Calm down." Like this happens all the time, but it's not just the coyotes. It's people.
And as the audience, we're seeing like there's like flashlights outside and stuff, but he's not catching this because he's looking a different direction. Yeah, so I'm sure if this was an old school movie and you're at the theater, people would be yelling at the screen, behind you, behind you. But no,
right? Yeah, thank God there was nobody in my house doing that.
That would have freaked you out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd be like, who's watching this movie through my front window? What the heck? So yeah, he tries to get up and stop them from whatever they're doing, and gets conked on the head pretty good. And then it goes to black, and we get the scene of him waking up. And it's a pretty visceral scene because his head is like, he got hit hard enough to be bleeding out of his head, and when he gets up, his head was like congealed to the floor.
It was a gross.
Yeah, I mean, it was very realistic. Like,
yes,
kudos on that. But yeah, it was definitely gnarly. And so yeah, he gets up, and he never at any point in this movie looks at himself in a mirror, I don't think. So he's got blood all over him and everything else, and he goes out to his truck. And so my next note was farm truck, because if anybody that lives out in the wilderness or has a farm needs to have a truck, and his it just happens to be covered with like a tarp and has no gas in it, and they make it clear that he does not leave this place very often, and this truck has not been used in a very long time. So he puts gas in it and does all that stuff and gets it up and going, and I mean, it's smoking, it sounds horrible.
Which I also appreciated the realism in this moment too, right? Because how many movies do we watch where a car has been sitting around for 10-20 years and they just throw some gas in and it's fine?
Right. And this one, it's fine for like 5 minutes. It doesn't sound fine, but he gets it going, and he gets up the road, and like there's smoke just coming out of the hood, and it dies, and he can't get it to start again. So he just starts walking, and he walks into this diner, and he asks if Marcy's there. I think her name was Marcy. That's what my note says, so hopefully that's right. But anyway, the lady at the diner says, Marcy died 10 years ago. And again, this is all just establishing stuff to show how like this guy is a hermit and does not leave. But also for our bingo card, I thought this would qualify as an awkward diner scene, because it was awkward walking in and saying, "Is Marcy there?" and she's dead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that an argument could be made for that. I think you get the square anyway by the end of the movie.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Yeah, this would be.
We had already marked it at this point.
I mean, that's
I was like, awkward diner scene.
But I do think it's really important that this shows that this is a man who has been up in the woods by himself for at least a decade.
Right.
He doesn't come down. He doesn't talk to people other than this one guy, Amir, who's played by Alex Wolff. Other than him, he probably doesn't see another human being.
Yeah, and the one thing I really like about this movie is how contrary it is to normal Nic Cage roles, because people generally hire him because they want him to talk, they want him to go through his full range of emotions in one sentence, and that's like their favorite thing, and that's why you hire Nic Cage. But in this movie, he very much plays a character that's like someone we've all met in our lives, that's doesn't talk, and when they do, you want to listen and hear what they say, because it's probably important. And they did a really good job of making him feel like that person, in this movie. And whenever he talks, it has some gravitas, because he's not doing the typical Nic Cage thing. He's not going through every emotion on the rainbow in one sentence. He's being very purposeful with the things he says and the way he says it.
Yes.
and it was wonderful throughout the whole movie. I mean, I was just drawn to it.
Everything is so deliberate in this movie. Like, not just in the way he's delivering these lines, but in the way the scenes are shot. It's all framed in these extremely purposeful ways. There's a lot of close-up shots of him where, like you were saying, like he doesn't have a ton of lines, right? But he is just saying so much with the emotion on his face
And his body language, just
yeah.
like the way he's carrying himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't get to see him like this. We really don't.
Not very often, no.
I think this is a good example of the range that he has when you compare. If you were to watch this and say, Unbearable Weight back to back, it just kind of shows what he can do.
So it makes me think of the Community episode where they're having the debate on whether he's a good actor or not. I think if this movie was out when that episode was made, that wouldn't have been a debate. And I think that anybody that's still trying to like have that debate, whether he's a good actor or not, they're just trolling, because he's clearly proven through many movies that even if he does 100 movies that are just like his typical KG stuff that everybody likes, there's still going to be a handful of movies where he's not that, and he proves that he's a good actor. And this is definitely probably close to the pinnacle of those movies.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So to get back into the movie, he calls the dude with the Camaro, Amir, and Amir comes and picks him up, and he's like, "We got to find my pig." And Amir's like, "Why is this my problem?" And he's like, "Because you got people you're trying to deliver to." So Amir at this point we kind of know that he's like a door-to-door salesman of truffles. Essentially, he like goes and buys truffles from all these different people, and then he goes to the restaurants. And I think this is around the time we find out that this is outside Portland. That is where he lives. Everything that he sells all these truffles in Portland,
right?
So he's got a lot of connections, but it's kind of implied that Rob is like his best guy that he gets the best truffles from. So it's important that he has his pig to get these truffles, continue getting the truffles for him.
The one part of the movie that, like, this is just probably my lack of knowledge on how this works, is like it felt like the whole thing was a crime syndicate. Like this was all underground.
I think that's purposeful.
But like, is it not legal to get truffles? Like, am I not understanding what the truffle business is? I don't know.
No, I don't think it's illegal. I think it's more just that it's a competitive business, and like every restaurant, like high-end restaurants, want the freshest and the best ingredients, and so you have multiple people like fighting to get that business. And it sounds silly because it does seem like a crime syndicate in this movie, and I think it's made to feel that way. I don't know that it's like that in real life, but in this movie, it was totally fine. I didn't have any issue with it. It was
no, I didn't have a problem with it. It made me think for a minute. Like, so all these restaurants getting black market truffle. This is what it kind of felt like.
It's not really black market truffles, but it's truffles from like farm to table type things, where it's like these are wild truffles, the freshest. Never like at one point, I think I can't remember who says it, but somebody says that like the truffles that Amir has are never refrigerated. They're just literally straight from the ground to the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so the fresher you get, and it's super important to these restaurants. So him and Amir go, he tells Amir what's going on, and Amir takes him to this other vendor that he gets truffles from. And he asked, because I guess at some point Rob saw the truck. And so he asked this person about the truck, and the truck, this person knows the truck. This is somebody that collects truffles for them, apparently, and they're tweakers. They bring up that they're tweakers. They're methamphetamine users or some sort of drug users, and they were just they do whatever they have to do to get the next hit or get money for the next hit. And so the lady storms off and goes with them to confront these tweakers about the pig. And so they get to the tweakers, and the tweakers say, "Oh, we don't have it anymore. We sold it. It's to this guy in a black car." They're portrayed as your typical kind of drug addict person that is so far gone that they can't remember anything, and they're literally just a hopeless addict at that point. And And so that's basically all they have to go on. So, and that was a businessman in a black vehicle in Portland, or something along those lines. Anyway, yeah, at this point, I have my notes that he is so disheveled because, like, constantly throughout this movie, as I mentioned earlier, there's not really any mirrors that he cares to look into. He's literally just bloody, muddy. You know, his hair is crazy, his beard is crazy, like everything is crazy. And he's like that through the whole movie. I feel so sorry for the makeup people that had to like keep up continuity throughout the whole movie.
Well, especially
it was
later,
very impressive
once he's got the cuts on his face and stuff like that. Yeah, that's hard to keep going.
Yeah. So they start. He has an idea of somebody that he can ask about this. Robin does, and so he tells him to drive him to this place, and he talks to this dude, Edgar, I think, is that his name?
Yes. Yeah.
And so he talks to Edgar, and Edgar, he brings, like, it's very John Wick, you know, if you talk about like a hotel, and he has to like these special like assassin coins, except that he goes up to Edgar and he brings him this like styrofoam food truck food. And Edgar like takes the time to open it and like smell it and take a bite of it. And maybe he doesn't take a bite of it. He's very intimate with the food, essentially. Like it's intended to be something meaningful to him. You know, like this is how Rob buys the time to talk to him and ask him the question. But yeah, he hands the food back, and we kind of get some hints at like Rob's backstory at this point, because he, you know, talks about how Rob's name used to mean something, and you know now it doesn't, and he's not even worthy to get a question answered by this guy.
He says the phrase like, "You don't even exist anymore."
Yeah, exactly. He's like a ghost, essentially.
Yeah. So clearly he was somebody somewhere for some reason, and that was a long time ago.
At this point, we don't really know.
Yeah.
You know, it's still a mystery. So then Rob gets this idea, and he said, you know, he gets in the car with Amir, and Amir says, "Well, where are we going now?" And he says, "Well, we're just going to wait until midnight." And so it's implied that they wait a little while, but then they go to like this like a restaurant storage area or something, and they have to like pull a bunch of shelves down and go through a hole in the wall. And Amir has kind of like a breakdown at this point. He's like, "You're not communicating with me. You're not telling me anything. I'm not on the inside. You know, why is this
in the loop?
Yeah. And he's like, you know, what's up with this pig? Why is this pig so important? I'll go buy you one. Do you fuck your pig? Like, what's going on?" And then we get this Nic Cage like kind of keeps working on what he's working on, but he tells him he doesn't fuck his pig. He says, "I don't fuck my pig," which I thought was a funny Nic Cage line. Like, if you look at all his lines in all his movies, that would be a really fun one to just kind of throw in there. But yeah, he fills him in that this is where it starts to get a little weird, and you're like, what is this movie? Because he says that there's a underground fight club for restaurant workers.
Yep.
And it's not really a fight club. No. They go in there, and you know, everybody sees Rob, and just kind of like there's a hush over the room, and he goes and puts his name on the board, and some little guy comes out and like rolls up his sleeves, and you think they're gonna fight, but then the dude literally, Rob just stands there and let the guy beat the shit out of him. So basically, rather than being a fight club, it's more just like a place where somebody goes to pay money to beat the shit out of somebody.
Well, no. So
is that not what it was?
Not exactly. So I did suss out the rules here. So what happens is the smaller guy is like, he's the enforcer. He's the guy who's going to be doing the hitting. And then another restaurant worker can come in, and they have to stand there with their arms behind their back. And the idea is how long can
they last for a minute or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we get to see one other fight, and the dude gets like a $500 payout or something like that. And so the longer you can last in the fight to stay up, right, the more money you make, and other people are putting bets down on this and stuff like that. And so
They're calling it a fight, but it's literally just how long you can stand up to getting the shit beat out of you.
Yeah, fight is used loosely. I'm not really sure if there's an appropriate term for it, but yeah. So
how long you could be a punching bag for, essentially.
Right. And so this is where, like, again, like I'm still trying to figure out at this point, because he goes in and he writes his name and he writes it huge.
Right.
Right. And because the guy had made a comment earlier on after he gave him the food and stuff, Edgar made a comment to Amir. He's like, do you even know his real name?
Right.
Right. So at that point, like, we're starting to think, okay, so he's not who he says he is or something like that. Right. So he writes his name up on the board and it's Robin Feld. Okay. But he writes it really big and everybody is like completely captivated by this and everybody's putting money down and stuff. And so this is where I'm like, okay, so maybe this is where the John Wick turn happens in the movie. Right. But no, he just gets like the shit beat out of him.
And it's supposed to be for a minute, but the guy, like, you can tell Edgar has some like joy in watching him get the crap beat out of him, because he doesn't call it at a minute. He lets the timer go like a ways past that and then calls it.
Yeah. Well, he stops the timer and just doesn't tell anybody for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clearly Edgar is hurt. And we never really learn what happened there, right? But Edgar is clearly hurt by Robin leaving whatever. We have yet to find out what world he has left, right? But he is in bad shape, and he looks in bad shape the rest of the movie. He's got a huge cut on his cheek that swells up.
Oh, right after this, like his whole like face looks like he got stung by like 20 bees and is all blown out. Yeah, it's gnarly.
It looked good though. I mean,
the makeup was really good. Yeah, I didn't want to look at him. I mean, it was just nasty looking, but
mission accomplished.
So yeah, like you said, he writes Robin Feld up on the board, and I have my notes that he's like a legend to these people. But you still don't really get an explanation.
And it's funny because, like, in retrospect, I'm trying to like figure out why I couldn't put certain pieces together, right? Because at this point we've got, okay, so part one, is the name of food, right? It's rustic mushroom tart. Yeah. Right. And we're talking about, all these truffles, and this guy's been missing and he does underground restaurateur fighting. Right. Everybody knows his name. I'm still not putting any of these pieces together.
Right. And I think that's reasonable. I mean, it's a weird thing. But anyway, after he gets the shit beat out of him for like 2 minutes at least, the Edgar hands him a folded up piece of paper. And so then we get part two, which is Mom's French toast and deconstructed scallops.
Yes.
So the next scene is basically Rob waking up at Amir's apartment. Mm-hmm. And Amir is cooking him French toast, which is where that part of the part of the name comes from for this part of the movie.
And I will say that this is the scene where, for me, the character of Amir changes from being this annoying, cocky, pretentious little dude to being like a fully fleshed out person.
I think that's intentional, for sure. Yeah,
there's some really good stuff.
He got some backstory about Rob. He, until then they were essentially strangers that saw each other once a week, but he started to get more about Rob and realize that this person has like a complicated past, and that he's a part of that now, and opens up. And we get some insight into Amir's life and like his relationship with his father. We find out that his father is a competitor of his, essentially. They both like find fresh ingredients and bring it to people.
We find out that Amir's mom committed suicide, which there's more on later.
Right.
We start kind of building out who this guy is, and that maybe this is more of a front that Amir puts on, and that he's not really this guy underneath.
Right. So yeah, my first note from this was his face is messed up, because this is like when his face is full on like bloated. Yeah. Half of his jaw is completely knocked out. I mean, it's just really swollen and gnarly looking. But man, I think I've said gnarly 3 times this podcast. Man. That's pretty good. I don't get that much 80s vernacular in this podcast, but I'm working on it. Anyway, we get the parents' story. He was a chef. His mom's committed suicide. I think that means his dad was a chef.
Well, no.
At one point, who was the chef? Maybe that's talking about Rob. Yeah, because he gives him some advice on the French toast. He says to use stale bread,
right,
for the French toast,
which I didn't know. So I'll keep that in mind, Rob.
So at this point, we're starting to put the pieces together that he was a chef. We saw him cook that rustic mushroom tart in the
Yes.
first one, but we didn't realize how special it was, I guess, at that point.
I mean, and I guess we didn't really even
They do
talk
show
about.
his they do show him like the amount of care he's taking with
Yeah.
it.
And he's doing like very kind of textbook stuff, right? Like he makes the flour mound that he cracks the egg into, and the
Right.
way he works the dough and he layers it in the pan. Like it's all very, again, methodical and deliberate, which is for me like 90% of this movie is extremely methodical and deliberate. And the way he makes that food is in the same kind of methodology of the film itself.
My next note is earthquake story. Do you remember what that was?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a whole quote about it. So Rob starts, they're talking about, their plans, right? They all, that Amir's got the grand plan and everything like that. And Rob says, and I'm going to paraphrase because it's a bit long, but basically every 200 years is a big earthquake on the Pacific coast, and all of Portland is going to be completely underwater.
Yeah. And that we're due for another one.
Right. That one's coming up soon.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a very morose, dark story, right? Because you've got the people who are all going to die when the bridges collapse and stuff, but it's really the people who are left behind. They're going to get it the worst because they'll think that they've survived it. And then a 100 or 10-story tidal wave is going to come crashing down on them. This is a heavy movie led by a very heavy martyr type character.
Yeah. And so after that, we see I can't remember why they split up at this point, but Rob is walking down the street and he is like, I had casual house stalking as my next note because he was like hovering around this one house and like creeps into the backyard.
He sends Amir out to get a reservation at a restaurant.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He says, I need a restaurant, or I need a reservation here. Can you get it for me?
And while that's happening, Rob is just kind of walking around.
It was the restaurant that was on the piece of paper that he got from the fight. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's the lead.
Yeah. And so he gets to this house, and it's implied that he knows this house somehow. And so he starts like walking around. He walks into the backyard and just like sees a kid that's just like playing.
The kid's got to be like 6, 8, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. The kid looked like he was maybe 2 to me, but you have a kid, so I feel like you know better than I do. But yeah, he's talking to the kid and asks him, about a tree that used to be in the back of the house. Parsnip? Was it a parsnip tree?
A persimmon tree.
Persimmon tree. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Parsnips don't grow on trees. At least I don't think so. I don't really know much about him. But anyway, yeah, he asks about this tree that used to be there, and the kid doesn't know what a persimmon is, so he describes it. And the kid like asks him if his face hurts, and he says, "Yep." But it's a really nice moment with the kid. It's we get to see Rob with his guard down a little bit.
I mean, look, I always like when Nick befriends a minor.
Yeah, we did. I do have that on here too. Yeah, we were going, well, is he a friend? Is he a friend yet? Is he befriended it?
I think it counts. This counts. Yeah.
It was a nice little moment where you get to see a little bit of a different side of the character.
I'm a little sad that I'll never look out my back door and see my daughter making friends with Nic Cage.
You might. I mean,
it.
never say never. You should plant a persimmon tree in your backyard. That seems like that would help your chances. Anyway, Amir does go get the reservation. And we find out because he has to go to one of his people that he sells to, and who's friends with the owner of this restaurant. And we find out that this restaurant is his dad's
turf.
Yeah,
they've split up the city.
He's not supposed to be there selling. And the guy brings that up, and he says, "Oh, I'm not selling. I'm just going for lunch."
The guy still doesn't want to do it. He offers him half off on the truffles, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Still, he says no until Amir mentions who the reservation is for.
Yeah, and he's starting to realize at this point how much weight that name carries in the restaurant industry in Portland. But yeah, he mentions the name, and the guy's like, "Yeah, no problem." And so then we get Eurydice, I think is the name of the restaurant.
That sounds right. Yeah.
But we get what is probably for me the strongest scene in the movie, and I'm sure for you too. Probably for most people.
Dude, this scene is so good. It is so good. I love every single thing about this scene.
Yeah.
Oh my
There,
God.
so this is where the you remember the name of this was Mom's French Toast and Deconstructed Scallops.
Right. So
That
we've
is
had the French
because
toast.
yes, the this restaurant is not like a restaurant I've ever been to. It's basically, it seems like you don't really order. You just receive whatever food is the inspiration of the day or whatever.
So it's a concept restaurant for those who are familiar with the term, right? And I wish I had written down um, what the dish was.
It was scallops of some kind, but it was
Yeah,
like it had some long name.
it was just
Uh,
she does this amazing. Let's
yeah,
see.
where it's like smoked with like pine
Yes,
wood.
here it is. Here it is. Okay, I got. So she comes to the table, and this is what she says. All right. Today's journey begins by uniting the depths of the sea with the riches of our forests. We've emulsified locally sourced scallops encased in a flash frozen seawater roe blend on a bed of foraged huckleberry foam, all bathed in the smoke from Douglas fir cones.
Yeah,
And yeah,
and
it comes in like a fishbowl that she removes, and there's all this smoke.
smoke. Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm so I mean it's a very fancy schmancy kind of place.
look, I love food. I am a food guy. I appreciate expensive food. I don't go for like pretentious type stuff
And that's
though.
definitely what this is.
Once you start talking about deconstructed, or you start talking about foam, if your dish includes a bacon foam or something like that, you've lost me at this
They
point.
didn't talk about deconstructed. Deconstructed is what Nic Cage's character did to the scallops. He deconstructed the.
Oh, he did deconstructed more than the scallops,
Yeah,
my
that's
friend.
true. But yeah, so it's this restaurant is all like a show
Yeah,
essentially. And
exactly.
yeah, and not only everything you described, but when she removed the smoke, there's literally like two scallops on each plate.
Oh, it's so tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the world's smallest serving of scallops.
This checks every box for me of a place I don't want to go eat at.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think
Yeah,
it's another example like this whole restaurant, as we get to when we get to Chef Finway, all of this is about the facade that other people see. And
yeah.
Rob is basically the antithesis of everybody else
Yeah,
that we
Rob is
see.
the agent of chaos in everybody's life in this movie. Basically, anybody he's interacting with is a different person after they've interacted with him in this movie.
Well, arguably, they're closer to their truer self. They've all
Right,
put on this act, and he, for whatever reason, right, has thrown that away and is just him. There is no
right.
facade anymore.
So yeah, through the scene, I think Rob tries one and then asks to see the chef. And so it turns out the chef was a student of his
An
and
employee.
or an employee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he recognizes him. It takes him a minute. He's like talking and explaining the dish. Or somebody asked something about truffles. Oh yeah, Amir asked about truffles. Do you have any dishes with truffles? And he talks about the winter
Mm-hmm.
selection that's coming up. And at some point, he recognizes Rob, and Rob starts asking him about like what his dream was, and his dream was to open a tavern.
Mm-hmm. Just
And
like a
Rob
pub.
knew this, or
Yeah.
pub, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it was.
I mean, same
And
difference. Yeah.
Rob asks him, because Rob remembers him talking about his dreams. He said he fired him because he always overcooked the pasta or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
so
when
yeah,
he fired him, he asked, "What do you want to do?"
right. And
You
yeah,
know.
so he knows that it was a pub, and so now you can see like this facade of this chef that's, for all intents and purposes, should be happy doing this. He's doing something pretty like different every day and getting to experiment. But it's not what he wants to do. Doing this pretentious food. He wants to do like a tavern or a pub with like pub food.
Mm-hmm.
And have that kind of thing. But yeah, Rob kind of just tears him apart in the scene, but not in a mean way. He like makes him question. He doesn't tell him anything, essentially. He just makes the guy question every decision that he's made since he left or since he got fired from Rob's restaurant.
The technical aspects of this scene are superb, right? We keep getting these side shots where it'll be just Amir or just Rob, and they're off center in these very kind of alone ways, very isolated shots. And every time we see Chef Finway, it's these very kind of, he's got some exaggerated face on where he's trying to
Hide.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
that
this,
actor did really well because you could
did.
tell he was like hiding and starting to like this real part of him, and he was starting to crack throughout this scene.
David Nell, I believe, Knell.
It's a
Wonderful.
tough. That's a tough. I mean, you can't just go to any actor and tell them what this is going to be and then have them nail it. But he did. You could feel it. We've all had that moment where we felt like, we're hiding a part of ourselves, and to have somebody start questioning things and make you feel like you don't know anymore. It was a great thing to watch.
It's very powerful, and you see the facade on Fenway's face start to kind of crack. The smile gets more and more exaggerated, more and more Joker-esque, and it, on a personal level, the guy's first name is Derreck. It's Derreck Finway. Derreck's my name, of course. And so, I was taking that scene very seriously. And there's just some really, very methodical way of handling the scene is Rob's questions, though.
Very purposeful questions to get a specific reaction.
There's this just amazing exchange right at the end where he talks about, he goes, Derreck, why do you care about these people? They don't care about you. None of them. They don't even know you because you haven't shown them. And then, he goes on a little bit longer. And at the end, he just goes, we don't get a lot of things to really care about. And that is such a good line delivered at like the perfect moment.
You're saying that line really touched you.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a good monologue in a stellar scene right at, for me, like the crux of the film, right? This right here showed me exactly what the point of the movie was.
And also it kind of hints as to why Rob is such a good chef, because he really, he sees more than like what's there. He's able to see the sum of all the ingredients and what it's going to be. It showed that he had a lot of caring about his employees in a direct way, but then also about what they could be. It's just a really great scene. It shows a lot of things. There's a lot of layers to the onion of this scene.
Rob is an extremely empathetic character, right? Like, to fire somebody because they're not doing a good job being a chef, right? But also taking the care to ask, well, what is it that you want to be doing? How do you want to spend your career? And not only like ask the question, but care enough to remember 15 years later is a big deal.
Right.
So,
and you kind of get the inkling that he has a pretty spectacular memory through later in the movie. But yeah, he clearly has a gift of a memory, because he remembers, like, I think later in the movie he says he remembers every meal he ever cooked for every person.
He does, yeah. When talking to
kind of a
Darius.
photographic memory.
But it's that empathy, it's that caring, it's that he has found his passion and what he cares about and what he cares for. And when he was doing that, when he was happy and he was doing that checked every possible box for him.
Yeah. Throughout the scene, we haven't really mentioned it, but he, towards the end, starts asking about a pig and, trying to get information, because Edgar pointed him here. So clearly somebody here has information about the pig. And we find out through this scene that it was that Amir's dad was behind the pig napping. And there's a big breakdown between Amir and Rob. And what's funny is this scene could have been very cagey, because there's a lot of anger, and when you get these like strong emotions, that's like where Nic excels. Mm-hmm. But it's not cagey. It doesn't feel cagey at all, this rage that we're seeing.
No, he's kicking in the side of the Camaro. He does yell once, but it's a very, like, to me, very personal, painful yell. It's not over the top. It's not exaggerated. It's not
It's a
unearned.
believable anger.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, not to say that Nic Cage's anger in other movies isn't believable, but it can be over the top, and that's what a lot of people pay the money for. But in this one, it's very believable. It didn't feel cagey at all. But yeah, so he goes and steals a bike. So yeah, my next note was casual bike theft, because he's just like walking down the street and sees a bike and starts riding it.
Yep. Just a bicycle, by the way, not a motorcycle.
And after this
Bicycle.
happens, we see Rob riding the bike away somewhere, probably to go confront the dad, I think is where he said at this point. And then we see Amir goes to someplace. We don't really know what it is, but he's communicating. He seems to be talking to his mother through a door. And earlier he had mentioned that his mom committed suicide. The nurse, like, as he's having this conversation with his mom, there's a nurse that walks up and asks if he wants to see her because they're getting ready to do something,
Clean her trach.
clean her. Yeah. And he says, no, I don't want to. But then when the door opens, he looks in at her anyway.
So we learn that something clearly happened to her. Maybe she attempted.
That's what I took it as, was
Yeah.
she attempted to suicide. So he wasn't outright lying, but she just wasn't successful. But we don't really know for sure. Could
We
be
don't.
anything.
Yeah, we don't get the details.
So Rob shows up at Amir's father's house,
Darius. Yep.
and
It's a mansion.
yes, it's a very large house. This person is clearly doing well for themselves, and he's confronting him about the pig. And we get Darius is a person that has been through a lot. He's not scared to commit crimes, to do the things that need to be done. He has plenty of money. He's pretty calm and collected for the most part. Nothing really phases him. Even when Rob gets emotional about it, it doesn't really faze him. He offers him $25,000. He said he'll bring $25,000 to him the next day so he can go buy a new pig. And he just kind of dismisses him and asks him to leave. And yeah.
It's a pretty good scene. I mean, Darius, he's played by Adam Arkin. Very believable performance. Dude seems like a scary dude that you don't want to mess with.
Right.
I do question a little bit, like, based on his resources, why he needed this dude's pig. Maybe it was just to prove a point
I don't
to
think
his
he
son.
needed the pig. I think that it was more about taking the pig away from Rob.
Yeah.
So that his son couldn't get the truffles.
And
because
man,
these truffles are so big.
Isn't that messed up?
It is.
But yeah, it's an intense scene.
Yeah.
And he basically just wants to buy Rob out and, threatens him at the end. He's like, I don't want to see you again, kind of thing.
Right. And when Rob leaves, Amir is out in his beat up Camaro, and says that he thought he might need a ride. And at this point, we find out that Rob never needed a pig to find the truffles.
Yeah, he makes a comment about how the trees tell you.
The trees tell you, yeah, and that the pig was more about companionship, and he just loves that pig. Which anybody with a dog or a cat that you really care about can relate to. Just because it's an animal doesn't mean that they're not important for you. And most owners would do anything to help their animal.
Yeah,
Derreck can attest to that. He's gone through some serious stuff with his, but
yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a big reveal, because now Amir feels like, why are we going through all this? Yeah. So, but yeah, so at this point,
but real quick, it does kind of feel like, again, like this is another opportunity where Rob is showing that, like, he's teaching Amir a lesson about living, right? About how to lead your life, right? That this has never been about getting truffles. This has been about who you care about, what you care about, and how you act in service of those people or things.
Yeah.
Right.
So at this point, we see Rob gets an idea. And so I guess we didn't cover this really when we were talking about the scene at Amir's apartment, but basically Amir talks about this one meal that his parents had before his mom committed suicide that they talked about for years, how amazing this meal was. And it turns out that Rob was the chef of that meal.
His parents fought all the time, but not that night.
That night they came back and they were happy and they were talking about the food, and they talked about it for years after that. And so at this point, Rob gets an idea, and we get part 3, which is a bird, a bottle, and a salted baguette. So he sends Amir out he makes him a list of ingredients and tells him to go. He doesn't really say it's ingredients. It's just kind of implied, but he says to go get these things. And Amir's like, I can't get these things. And he's like, just use my name and you'll get these things. And sure as heck, yeah, he shows up at these places and he uses Rob's name and he's able to get things. And we get a scene with Rob going to get the bottle, which was mentioned in that title. The bird, a bird, a bottle, and a salted baguette. So Rob goes to get the bottle, and he's talking to an older woman.
Well, no, so Rob gets the baguette.
He also gets the bottle because he's talking, or doesn't he? Because he's talking to the older woman about Lori.
No, that's Amir.
Oh, is it?
Because it's at a funeral home. It's at a cemetery.
And the wine is like all in the basement.
It's Lori and Rob's collection that she more or less inherited because Rob disappeared, essentially.
Yeah. And Rob wanted a specific bottle and had one.
And this is where we start to learn a little bit that, Lori is dead. We're now supposed to assume that she's the voice on the cassette tape, and that this woman has left the space next to her open for Rob in case he ever...
Yeah, in the mausoleum.
Right.
Yeah. And then we get a scene with Rob going to, what we find to be later was the site of his and Lori's restaurant, I believe, yes. And that now is a bakery.
Mm-hmm. Run by one of clearly somebody who worked for him at that restaurant. She must have been a pastry chef or something like that.
Yeah, and the salted baguette was a part of something special that he had cooked. And he asked her if she has any of those and if she's changed the recipe. And she says no. And so she gives him one of the baguettes, and then she pulls some other pastry off of a tray. And he asks for a second one, which I thought was a little interesting. I'm assuming for Amir.
Well, he gives it to Amir. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is supposed to be the moment where you're realizing that, like, he cares.
They have a bond now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they get all the ingredients and they essentially break into Amir's dad's house, Darius's house.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, because the way Darius reacts initially to Amir certainly makes it sound like Amir's allowed to kind of come and go as he pleases.
They clearly have a key. I mean, it just, he already told Rob to leave and not come back.
Right.
And so Rob coming back, it seems like it's more close to breaking and entering than anything. But yeah, they did not actually break in.
But just real quick though, going back to the bakery for a moment, this is another really emotionally charged scene where Rob is with somebody like at a table. Yeah. Right. We get like 4 of these, maybe 5 throughout the whole movie, and he says very little. What he does say is very kind of straight and to the point. There's no, anger in his voice or anything like that. But you can see that she has a really strong connection to him. She cares about him a lot, that he and Lori meant a lot to her. And now that she's taken over the spot, she still cares for him a great deal. She hugs him and everything like that. And it's just, again, it's another really nicely shot scene. It is pulling in ever so slowly as the two of them are talking, just getting a little bit closer over time. And the way it's shot is just really good. I love the way this movie is shot.
Yeah. And as he's walking out, he says, "Oh, you took down the curtains." And she says, "Yeah, Lori always wanted them taken down, and so we took," or something along those lines. There's a nice little moment about how she remembered what Lori liked and what they thought was best, and Rob says, "Yeah, that was the right decision," or something along those lines.
It's better this way.
Yeah, but Rob and Amir go into Darius's house uninvited, and it appears that Rob is teaching Amir how to cook this dish which is the same dish that he made for Darius and his wife many years ago. And so they go through all this trouble and make this dish. And Amir goes and tells his dad to please just come out. His dad is in his office working, and he's just, please come out. There's a surprise for you, or something along those lines.
He says,
we made
finally,
you
he says,
something.
we made you dinner.
Yeah, we made you dinner.
And the we, I think, is what really draws Darius out.
Yeah, and so he comes out, and they lay the food very purposefully in front of him, and Rob pours the wine, and he says, Amir found this, implying that it's a very like hard to get vintage. And Darius tries the food, and he smells the wine and has a sip of the wine, and immediately like gets up and walks away and starts breaking down. Kind of implying that and for all of us, I think it's true. There's certain things, certain smells, certain tastes that remind you of something that was maybe better, or just a really fond memory. That can cause serious emotion, and it does in this case. And through this exchange, we find out that it's a very emotional dinner. I don't want to skip over it. The whole scene is very purposeful. Shot in a very purposeful way. And yeah, that's how it ends up. And he tells him to get out as he's kind of breaking down. And Rob wants to know about his pig, and Darius tells him that the tweakers were a little too rough with it, and that the pig passed away. And he's, Rob just breaks down. It's the most emotion we really see out of Rob, other than maybe like the angry scene where he's kicking the car. But again, it does not feel like a typical Cage scene. It's not like an overacted scene. It's just we've all seen somebody have an emotional breakdown, and it feels like a genuine emotional breakdown, like you're watching somebody you care about break down. And again, very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, all of it, it's all so emotionally charged, and it just builds and builds and builds. Things start very tense, getting Darius to come sit down, getting, the table set and the food set and the drink pour. Like, the tension continues to build, and you're still, like, at least for me, I still wasn't sure which direction the scene was going to go. Was Darius going to flip out and like throw a punch, or, throw the food against the wall? Like, I kept expecting some chaotic explosion to occur. And instead, the tension just keeps ramping up until there's this emotional collapse between the two of them, Darius and Rob, in Darius's office. They're both extremely emotional, very distraught. And they kind of just come to an understanding that there's nowhere more to go.
I have a quote that I don't remember. I think it was between Amir and Rob, talking about the pig and what's going on. And Rob says that if I never came looking for her, in my head she'd still be alive. And Amir says, but she isn't.
Well, yeah, right.
And
he says she wouldn't be.
She wouldn't be. Yeah, that's right. And it was just a pretty powerful exchange.
Well, because at this point, so they leave.
Yes.
And Amir is driving Rob back home, and they stop at the same diner that Rob stopped at the beginning, and they sit down to eat there, which is what I would consider to be, no question, an awkward diner scene. It's very quiet. Amir asks for pie. She says they don't do pie, which, I mean, no offense, but you're a diner, like, make pie. Like, come on. But yeah, it again shows how far Rob and Amir have come. The two of them, that Rob is able to say something so kind of vulnerable as to, wishing that none of this would have happened, so he could pretend that his pig was still alive, right? But Amir also being empathetic enough to be kindly honest in this situation and say that it still wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
To me, it's Amir. It's one of the first times we see who Amir really is underneath all the bullshit.
Right.
And
then Rob says, I'm gonna walk the rest of the way. And Amir says, I'll see you on Thursday.
Well, at first Amir's worried. He's like, "Are you okay?" I think because
Yeah.
at least for me, I was concerned that Rob was going to commit suicide himself.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know how Lori died or why. We know his pig is dead, and we know that for him, that was his last kind of connection to the world. Right? So for me, I was concerned too, and Amir seemed legitimately worried.
Yeah. So yeah, he says he's gonna walk and he tells him everything's fine and that he'll see him on Thursday. Something along those lines. I don't remember who says he'll see you on Thursday, but either way, that's the implication you get is that he's gonna still go find the truffles. And we get another scene at the same river that was in the opening of the movie, with Rob kind of washing his face, cleaning his hands. And I'm sure there's some symbolism there, maybe a fresh start or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure. But it's a nice looking scene. And he goes back to his cabin and he puts in the tape again, and he's able to listen to the whole tape this time.
But
And
again, like,
that's the end of the movie.
right. And to show, like, again, how like deliberate and methodical things are, right? So he walks back into the cabin doors open this whole time he's been
Yeah.
gone. You see his pig's bed still sitting next to his bed,
and he looks at it,
he slowly takes his boots off, like we're watching him unlace his boots, like it's all so deliberate, to just kind of show how thoughtful of a character Rob is. Like every action matters, just like everything he says matters. He doesn't just speak to speak, which I can't say for myself.
Yeah. I can't say that for you either. This podcast is a perfect example.
It is. It really is.
But yeah, that's how the movie ends, with him listening to the tape, the full tape of his wife, who is no longer there. So kind of a nice character moment that he has progressed now. He couldn't listen to the tape before, but now he can. Maybe it's because he's trying to feel a connection again because he doesn't have his pig, and that's like the last bit of connection to his wife. Who knows? But yeah, that's the end of the movie.
And I thought it was a very fitting end that was in line with the tone of the film, that feels appropriate. I was worried that we were going to end it with some like Rob returns and opens a new restaurant kind of thing. And, while that's not bad, of course, I don't think that really fit the tone as well as this did.
Agreed.
So that's the end of the movie. For those who may have streamed it or whatever, the Blu-ray menu is the river just kind of flowing that you have at the beginning and the end of the film, which was kind of an interesting way to kick things off, and then end, of course, when you return to the menu at the end of the film. Just kind of bookended it nicely for me.
Right. So yeah, now we got to rate it. You really enjoyed it. I'm curious to see where you're going to put it.
Right. So we rate all of our movies on 2 scales, 0 through 20, overall quality and overall caginess. 0 is low, 20 is high. I mean, I love this movie. I thought this movie was absolutely incredible across the board.
Was this your favorite movie that we've watched so far?
I don't know if it's my favorite. I think it's probably the best. It's probably the best.
Because Joe was another one that like we didn't necessarily love because it's a very dark movie, but it's really, really good.
I mean, we rated Joe somewhat high. The highest for me was Adaptation.
Yeah, which was also a great movie.
Which was really great. And, it's tough, right? Because, I hesitate to give any movie a 0 or a 20. I hesitate to pick the top. But this was the best thing I've ever seen him in. It's arguably the best he's ever been in anything I've seen him in. And that's not to discredit some of his other movies like Leaving Las Vegas or anything like that, where he is clearly stellar in it. But I loved this movie. And so for me, I think this is the bar. So I think I do have to give this, from a quality standpoint, a 20. I do.
Wow.
There's nothing I would change about it. I don't have a single complaint or a single knock against it. I love everything about this movie and feel very content with it, which is a rare feeling. I just don't know how he would top it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when we were coming up with the rating system for how we were going to do it on this podcast, this movie was always going to be a 20 and a 0. You know, when I was thinking about, like how we're going to rate movies, it was always going to be when we're talking about his best movie. This was going to be it, and then we were talking about how cagey he was. This is always going to be a 0 for me, or a 1 maybe, because, or whatever our lowest one is, because he's not cagey. He's not the Nicolas Cage we know in this movie at all. He's something much more interesting. Not more interesting. There's not a nice way to say it. He's a more developed. This was kind of the culmination of a lot of different things that he'd done over the years. Mm-hmm. And you could tell that he really was happy to be in this place and be able to showcase this side of him.
I mean, the word he used when asked about the role is seasoned.
Yes.
And I think that's a good, aside from the fact that it also fits the tone of it being, he's a chef, right? I think it does fit though, right? This is an extremely well thought out role. It's deep, it's rich, it's nuanced. Because he doesn't have a ton of lines in this. Most of his performance is his face and his body language. And when he does talk, the way the lines are delivered are so purposeful that, this is on a different level from what we tend to see from him. And that's not to say that his other stuff is bad. He's got some great movies out there. And we've talked about some of them, Adaptation and Leaving Las Vegas. The Trust was actually surprisingly good. Moonstruck, of course. I personally, I really liked his performance in The Family Man, as much as that's not as serious of a film. So yeah, I think 20 and 0 are my numbers.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at too. I mean, that's, like I said, that was where, when we were thinking about where the bar is, what I've been trying to compare other movies to, that's basically where it's at, for quality. I don't think there's going to be another movie that touches this one, that's currently out. I mean, he could always top himself.
Sure.
But, if that happens, then we can adjust later. We have done that on some movies before, as we see more, our knowledge of his range grows a little bit, and we've adjusted movies before. So if we have to adjust this a little bit, then maybe we will someday. But for now, I'd say, this is a 20 on quality and the lowest, whatever, is 0 or 1 on caginess.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'll be curious to see what the opposite of that is. What's the 20 on caginess and a 0 on quality, but.
I mean, from what I'm understanding, it might be Willy's Wonderland. I haven't seen that one myself, but no, it's not that one. Okay.
No, maybe Vampire's Kiss. Maybe. We'll have to see.
Maybe.
But yeah,
I don't know. I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy that one probably more than the average person.
That doesn't make it a good movie though.
That's true.
But anyway, yeah, I think staying focused on this one, I think we're both in agreement on that one. I don't think there's any real argument that needs to be made.
No.
So that's where I'll put it. That's going to be its own little dot way out there on our scale. That's
perfect. I'm good with it. So that is our benchmark. 20 quality, 0 caginess.
I bet Joe like the closest one to that, because it was very not cagey also. And we had it rated pretty high.
Joe is pretty close. Let's see. Joe won't be the closest. There's one that's a little bit closer. I'd have to figure out what it is, but
it might be Leaving Las Vegas. Probably is.
No, because Leaving Las Vegas had some caginess
that's
to
true.
It. I think, I don't know. I'd have to do some checking.
Okay,
but,
I was just curious.
Yeah, I think it actually. You know what? I think it's an outlier. Yeah, it's Teen Titans Go to the Movies, because he doesn't have a large enough role to really get too cagey with it, and so the caginess is very low. So really, Joe, from like an actual starring role perspective, Joe and Adaptation are both equally close in two different ways.
And it makes sense to me, because if somebody said, "Man, I really like Joe. What movies should I watch of Nic Cage's?" the other two would be the instant recommends, or vice versa on any of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last thing that we have to do then here is we just have to figure out what movie is going to replace Pig on our Wheel O Cage. And that movie is going to be the movie Snowden.
Okay.
Snowden. So Snowden's joining the wheel to find out what Nicolas Cage movie we're going to talk about next. Go to comingofcage.com and watch our latest Wheel O Cage to see what shows up on our spin. Of course, you can find our show on your podcast app of choice. You can watch us on our YouTube channel if you want to see our beautiful faces as we talk about Nicolas Cage. Ryan, anything else for Pig?
Go check it out. It's not a fun movie, but it's one that's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, that's it. That's it for us. I'm Derek. That's Ryan.
We'll see you after our truffle hunt.